All right, so this is Joe Hollis at Mountain Gardens. It's middle of November and 2021. And we've made quite a lot of videos of the garden, but we thought we'd make a video of just all the buildings, just so particularly people that want to come here and stay for a while, just to give you an idea of what the facilities are here. So this is our main building. I call it the pavilion, or people call it the library, or they'll call it the herb shop. It's kind of a common room for the apprentices here who like to keep the middle of it open. And then a lot of it is a library. So, and it's a big library, and this is not all of it by any means. So we have it divided into natural history here, botany, mushrooms, all that kind of thing. And then this whole section here is gardening, which is everything from how to grow stuff, biodynamic gardening, edible wild plants, wild foods, history of gardening, gardening as a design, food plants of China, whatever, perennial herbs, so individual herbs, and then also just garden design kind of things. And then this rack is buildings and crafts. So barefoot architect, paper making, all kinds of craft stuff, dye, vegetable dyeing, and energy as well, solar energy and rocket stoves, all that kind of thing. Bunch of stuff on bamboo down here, which we're very interested in. And then over here, this is all medicinal herbs. From here over, this bunch is particularly Chinese medicinal herbs. How to grow them, how to use them, basics of Chinese medicine, lots of books on IDing herbs, lots of stuff on using Western herbs according to Chinese medicine. Got a half a dozen books on that. And the rest of it is just Western medicinal herbs, a little section of Ayurvedic herbs. So how to identify the herbs, how to grow the herbs, how to use the herbs. We call this a self-help health center. I don't give any medical advice, but we've got this big library that you can use for self-diagnosis. And then you can choose herbs from back in the herb shop here. These are all Chinese herbs, arranged in traditional Chinese fashion with these cool labels which we had designed. And then we have a whole wall of tinctures over here. These are single herb tinctures from herbs that we gather in the garden or out in the woods, wild crafting. And in a few occasions, there are things we have to buy because we can't possibly grow them, tropical things that we still want to have available to people. So this is all self-service. We've got bottles here and labels and funnels, and you can mix several things together in a bottle if you want. It's $15 for a 2-ounce bottle. And then across the top, these are all mostly Chinese formulas. These are all formulas for all different purposes. Jade screen is the most commonly used one for immune boosting at the moment. Joint fatigue. Fully preserved metal is for the lungs, longevity elixir, on and on. Tinctures for everything, a lot of them for mental clarity, mastermind, ginkgo healthy brain, things for broken bones, number of martial arts formulas. Pneumonia prevention is a big one for COVID at the moment. So all this, it'd be nice to get all this upgraded, make new labels for these things. They're getting kind of old looking. A lot of them are just homemade. That's a project somebody could work on at some point. And then this is kind of overflow medicinal herb books back here, and a little section of books about psychoactive plants. And then back in here is also the seed collection. So we gather a lot of seeds. That's one of our businesses, is selling seeds of these pretty rare herbs, a lot of them, hard to come by. The colored dots are indicating the year when it was collected. And this is overflow. This is all vegetable garden seeds and so on. And then stepping back over here, just to finish talking about the library, there's a whole section on sort of philosophy and religion, and there's some just reading, light reading. There's a whole section of poetry here over the top, and then the upper shelves on this side are a lot of anthropology and history, sociology, all that kind of thing. Bunch of stuff about Sarawak, where I was in the Peace Corps, Borneo. Just a whole variety of random stuff. We're actually going to be doing a very big reorganization of the library because at this point, almost a third of the library is over at my house, and that includes a lot of the best books. So I want to get them over here, but that means we got to get some stuff out of here because the shelves are totally crammed. So we're going to be doing a big sorting and put a lot of these older books into sort of deep storage over at my house. And we really want to catalog the whole library and maybe even put it up online. It's really quite an excellent library for what I'm trying to do, which is make a paradise garden. So we got everything from eco-philosophy, eco-psychology, down to like plant propagation and useful plants and so on. The library covers the whole range of how to live on Earth is the general idea. How to live on Earth without messing it up. That's the whole objective of the project here. And then there's also, this is a whole section of cookbooks and stuff relating to food, and also making mead, making beer, and so on. There's an herb dryer here. We have a newer, bigger herb dryer out in a sunnier area, but we also use this one. Here we're drying some juhua, Chinese chrysanthemum. So these are a lot of Chinese cookbooks, especially Chinese medicinal cookbooks, medicated cuisine they call it. It's kind of one of our specialties. Lots of stuff about fermentation and using wild foods and so on. So that is, I think that kind of covers the situation in here. A couple of meads in process up there. These are all bricks that we made with a cinvaram. It's basically clay with a little bit of cement, and these are going to be used hopefully at some point to make a bake oven kind of rocket stove combination here in the corner. So lots of different interesting projects going on. And we'll move on to, we do a lot of seed cleaning. This is all screens for the seed cleaning down here. Different sizes. And that's always an ongoing job. Seed cleaning. Using these and using various other methods as well. All right, so we will move on to a different space. All right. All right. Yeah, we should probably keep the doors shut. It's ridiculous to have to keep sweeping out these leaves.
I know, yeah.
But they gotta keep blowing in.
Yep, I'm gonna shut it, yeah.
So we can't totally close this door because of the cats,
Right.
but we just close it almost all the way. We just put a brick
Right. Yeah, yeah.
To keep it slightly open for them.
Yes. I have seen that. Wait, sorry. I'm just making the film right now of this area.
All right, so just to finish up in here, drying a bunch of garlic. I just wanted to mention this building is pretty much constructed from wood that was on the land here. So these are all poplar logs, and then we had a few big poplars that we got sawed at a little neighborhood sawmill. So this building is pretty much entirely off the land. These are all some recycled windows that were on their way to the dump somewhere. So this was a very low cost building. These are the words we live by right here. That's a nice poster from the Bread and Puppet Theater. All right, let's look outside. So this is our outdoor kitchen where everyone cooks. And we've got a nice big cook stove, but rarely gets used. Mostly people prefer to just use a little rocket stove, which is nice. It just burns little brushy, twiggy kind of material. And it works very well. So the water comes downhill from the National Forest. It's just, so all we have is cold water. Maybe by next year we'll manage to get some hot water. I've lived without hot water for almost 50 years, but it would be nice to have some hot water. So we might look into seeing if we can afford to do that at some point. So this is just the space that apprentices shared. They take turns cooking and cleaning up. Then there's a space back here that is kind of overflow apothecary space. These are all tinctures in process, waiting to be pressed. We make the tincture. A lot of them are Chinese herb formulas. This one's fresh reishi mushrooms. All different sorts of things. And they sit for a month, and then they're going to get pressed out. And we have a nice heavy-duty tincture press that utilizes a car jack. So as opposed to squeezing tinctures out by hand, this is vastly more efficient. And there's some other stuff back in here. Lots and lots of recapable bottles if we ever have somebody come by again who likes to make beer. We've got a whole setup for beer making. We typically make more mead than beer, but beer making definitely an option. So then we have over here a wood-fired oven. This is a Cobb bake oven, especially good for pizzas, which don't take very long, but you could bake bread in here. This is the sort of oven where you make the fire inside, get all the masonry heated up, and then bake inside of there. You improvise a little doorway. As you can see, the little bees are having fun extracting all of our clay. And this one is just the base for making a lot of hot water. We have a distillation apparatus that fits on here that we utilize. So that is some of what's going on in the outdoor kitchen. Then we can look under the building over here for just a minute. This is a fire pit that we use to sit around in the evening, or you can cook on open fire too if you want to. Another option.
Well, thank you. I'll check
And then we can look under the building for a minute. So this is the tool room. And it's kind of a jumble. Got a lot of rechargeable tools here, and plumbing and whatnot, all little hand tools. It's kind of a mess. We would love to have somebody here who likes to organize. That'd be very welcome. All screws and nails and just all kinds of random stuff that's a little bit too good to throw away. And then this is the solar setup for the pavilion up overhead, and several other shelters get electricity from here as well. The panels are down below next to the driveway. So that is some of what goes on in here. It's just all kinds of surplus cable and almost a complete set of arborist tools and ropes and everything. If you have any arborists who would like to come, we've got probably almost all the equipment that you would need. Lots of lanterns, of course, but now we're pretty much on the solar, so we don't need the lanterns so much anymore. All right, good. Oh, and here's our beer making setup. If anyone comes along who wants to make beer, CO2 cartridge in a keg. So we've made a lot of beer years past, and we would love to have a beer maker in attendance again in the future. This is our heavy duty herb grinder. It can powder more or less anything. Super high speed grinder from China that we use for powdering herbs to make what do you call it, percolations, and we also make honey pills out of the herbs. Using need to be powdered. All right, that's good for that one. To the front of this building we have a little greenhouse. This was all beautiful glass greenhouse, and then one year we had a kind of snow ice storm, and the ice came off the roof and shattered everything. So now a lot of it's plastic, unfortunately. This is all cob. There's nice thermal mass. This is all just the clay we dug out from behind to make a workspace back there. So this is all just providing thermal mass, and all these things can theoretically have little plants in them if we ever get around to doing it. Cacti and so on. And then this was tomatoes and peppers and eggplants through the summer, but they're finished now. So we just got a little bit of winter vegetable cover crops. Probably should have planted it a little bit earlier, but it's coming along. And in the springtime, this will all fill up with potted plants for sale. This is like, so we don't have permanent planting in here because we're just going to fill it all up with flats of cuttings and seedlings and so on. And that's what goes on here. All right, now we're finished, I think. All right, so this is our defecation situation. This is outhouse, and the system is it's just a bucket, 5-gallon pail in here. And we either use some sawdust, appears to be at the moment, or like a mixture of peat moss and wood ashes. The whole idea is to keep it dry, and then it doesn't stink and attract flies and so on. So the way we keep it dry is by not urinating in here. The urination is next door. When these buckets are full, what we used to do is dig a trench. Well, originally what I did is just put it into holes and then plant trees on top of it. But as there have been more people here and more buckets, then we got into making trenches. And thousands of lineal feet of trench have been made out on the, what we call the terraces. Every one of the terraces out there started off as a trench to bury these buckets. Now we have set up a humanure situation, which we could glance at briefly, where we dump them and cover them over with sawdust, and then we're just going to let it sit for a year or so before we utilize it. And then on this side, we have a place to collect urine, although of course it's fine to just pee on the compost piles or something. But this is just a tub that we collect urine, like for visitors and so on, who aren't comfortable peeing in the woods. And we take that urine and dump it on our leaf piles over here. It helps the leaves rot down in 1 year instead of 2 years. We definitely always utilize the urine, and then sometimes in the winter we'll mix it with wood ashes to make fertilizer. I have a whole separate YouTube thing about utilizing urine that you can look at if you're interested. We could also dump it on something like that big hugel bed of old rotten wood and bark and so on. So that'd be a good place to dump the urine on. It's just very high in nitrogen, so it helps everything rot down a lot quicker. All right, so this is what we call the old yurt. This is the oldest building on the property. This was built in about 1972, I think. And it's in pretty bad shape. The roof has been painted many times. It's a wooden yurt, so that was designed by a man named Bill Copperthwaite, who lived up in Maine. I was privileged to actually visit his place. He lived very remotely, no electricity, off the grid and so on. And he invented these wooden yurts. It's the idea of it was that it was meant to be built by high school students who had never built anything before, working together. And the idea is you prefabricate all the parts and you put it all up in one day, which we did. We picked a day when it snowed 8 inches, so that was a whole separate story. But we're standing right here on the edge of the National Forest. National Forest starts about 10 feet in that direction. This boxwood has been here a long time. Boxwoods now have a new disease that's moved in, and is slowly killing all the boxwood. So this boxwood will be getting removed. I just don't want to spray heavy-duty fungicide on it for the foreseeable future. There's not really a cure for this fungal problem. So here's the yurt. It's a really pleasant space. I think I like this yurt more than any other building on the property, actually. This was kind of my own personal study for a long time. Well, I lived in it while we built the log cabin, which we will look at presently. And then since then, it's been basically apprentice housing. For a while, it was my own study, and I had it all filled up with a million things. It doesn't hold heat at all, but it's very easy to heat it up. You can come in here in the winter when it's 20 degrees and have it comfortable in here in about 20 minutes, just because it's just this one space, and so you get the radiant heat. You get this nice little yodel stove. So this is one of the shelters that is available for apprentices to stay in, and it definitely needs some work. There's definitely some rot here and there and leaks. Really, I should probably cover the whole roof over with a tarp, but I just need somebody else to come along and help out with that. It used to have a nice clear skylight that was a lot of fun. You could see the sky up there. And it'd be nice to get back to that at some point in the future. So It's just a question of who's here and what their abilities are, what kind of things get done. But this is one space that's available. And we'll look at the other one, which is the new yurt. So the oldest building on the property is this one. The newest building on the property is a different yurt. Bill Copperthwaite actually came down to North Carolina. It was a reunion of my Peace Corps group, and we built a new yurt in about a week. It was a very fun project. So that is the other, another housing option that we'll look at next. In action, we've got a couple of these homemade ones. This one we actually bought, but we've made them by hand as well using old pieces of stovepipe. Quite brilliant, very effective for, there's a lot of research going into these rocket stoves for third world countries where lack of firewood has become a very big problem. People have to walk for hours to get enough wood to cook on. So a lot of research going into making the most efficient possible little stoves.
Okay.
All right, here's one of our numerous compost piles. We just use these hoops. We've done it a lot of different ways over the past 50 years. But currently we're just setting up these hoops and filling them up with compost and just kind of leaving them. A lot of urine gets dumped on here. It's mostly weeds and maybe some dried leaves in this case. And kitchen scraps get buried in here. We have a few ducks over here. We dug this pond by hand, I think about 4 years ago. That was a big project. It took most of the summer, 7 or 8 people. It's lined with a rubber liner. Everything around here, there's no way to make a pond around here without a liner. It's just too much loose, rubbly rocks underneath. So the ducks are happy. They're meant to give eggs, which they're not giving us so many of, but we're hoping to get some. We've just planted a lot of cover crops. It was sort of too shady in here to really have nice pasture for the ducks. But a big tree over here died, and we cut down a couple of others, and now we've got a lot of sun in here, so we're hoping. We planted a lot of comfrey across here, and also fescue grass, so we're hoping to get the ducks onto nice green pasture. And the comfrey, they love to eat comfrey. So this is the new yurt. This is the newest building on the property. Bill Copperthwaite actually came down to North Carolina, as I said, and directed our building this. And so we can walk up and look at the new yurt. So here's the new yurt, and this is also right on the edge of the National Forest. I think maybe the overhang actually projects into the National Forest. Wouldn't surprise me any. It's a rhododendron. So this is all National Forest up here. And this. You still have that little block of wood that goes under there. All right, so this is the new yurt. It's got a monstrously oversized stove in it at the moment, which belongs to someone else who might come and get it one of these days. So you can see it's just a nice little cozy spot. It does have electricity coming over from the Pavilion Library, and could easily have running water in here. At one time there was a sink in here. It got taken out, but that could be put back in. And at the moment it's occupied, as you can see. This space is quite well insulated. This is a really comfortable place to spend the winter in here. So this is at some point, it'd be really great to get a skylight up here. We haven't gotten around to it yet, but that is potential. And so this is just another housing situation for apprentices. We'll just do a minute or two down in this greenhouse. So here's my seat. where I sit and work. Look out over the garden. Really nice view. Just see what's going on. We should have filmed this a week ago when it was all a blaze of color. But I sit here and pot plants, plant seeds, whatever. It's kind of my sitting spot. So this is right outside my house. Gets really nice afternoon sun. It's facing west. Let's go down and look at this third greenhouse. So this is on the third side of my house. This one is tall enough that I could actually have an apricot tree in here, which has been quite productive. Apricots, thing about apricots and almonds as well, they're hardy, but they want to flower in February. And then they're inevitably going to get frozen, so that's why it's inside. This is one of the hardy citruses. What do they call it? Yuzu ichandrin. But it might not be quite hardy outdoors. That's why it's in here. And just a lot of different kinds of vines and things I'm trying out. There are a lot of interesting ferns in here. The holly fern, blechnum, the heartstone fern, and this little maidenhair. This is konjac. It's a jack in the pulpit, Erissima. Just a minute, I'm not remembering what species it is. Comes from Japan, and they make an edible starch, and it's starting to show up in grocery stores where there's so many people wanting to avoid gluten, avoid grain, that is to say. So they make noodles out of this in Japan, the roots of it. I think it might very well be hardy, but a lot of these things are just trying them out in the greenhouse, and then when they multiply, and you see this one made 3. So I moved one outside. We'll see if it'll make it through the winter. And a giant mayapple from China that might also turn out to be hardy. It's spreading around, so we have extra roots to spare. There's a little jasmine, rosemary, odds and ends, turmeric, diviner sage in here somewhere. So some of these things are totally not hardy, but some of them are just in here on a trial basis. And they might turn out to be hardy. I'll move them. Once they get big enough to divide, then I'll move half of them outside and try it out. So that is this greenhouse. Right? So this is just a little garden shed. It was kind of a catch-all tool shed, whatever. And then when we closed down the herb shop for COVID, we decided to make this little pop-up shop for selling tinctures, mostly to people in the neighborhood. And then outside we sell potted plants in season. We've already put them down on the floor now. But so it's little. I'd like to turn it into kind of a visitor reception area at some point in the future. But at the moment, it's just handy for people in the neighborhood to stop by and grab tinctures without even having to walk all the way up the driveway. It's right beside the driveway. In our series on the various facilities here, we have come to my house. So we'll just spend a couple of minutes here. I just kind of wanted to show you the book situation, because we looked at the library over there, which is packed, and now the library is kind of moved over here, so a lot of these are the very best books, actually. I want to get them moved over to the other building. This entire shelf here is primarily on Taoism. That's a whole bunch of anthologies of Chinese literature, encyclopedias of Taoism. There's everything here, gardening and philosophy and qigong exercises and on and on and on. So, just to say, there's a very big library project, sorting and rearranging project, if that's of interest to anyone. So my house is, let's look upstairs for just a second. This is kombucha in process. We're currently buying volumes of the Science and Civilization in China. It's about a 25 volume item. We're not going to get all of them probably. Trying to get some Salvia divinorum cuttings here. Seem to be doing all right. So a few plants brought in, some yage, ayahuasca, psychotria, just different things that I particularly want to protect from the cold. Most of what we grow is hardy. We don't really try and deal too much with things that have to come indoors for the winter. This is a loquat, which we can use the leaves medicinally. And more books. A lot of this has to do with teaching materials for some classes I taught on medical botany and so on, but it's gotten kind of random. Books everywhere, and files. All these files that need to be kind of arranged and updated. This entire one is on Chinese gardens, philosophy, aesthetics, poetry, individual gardens, techniques, whatever. All kinds of, this is pretty much on Chinese medicine or herbal medicine and gardening and whatever, on and on and on. In here. All really good stuff. All needs to be made more accessible to people. And then this is just overflow tincture material in these kind of cool bottles. And there's even more books upstairs, but we don't really need to go up there. But we're going to look around. Well, let's go downstairs. Here. So my house is surrounded with greenhouses on 3 sides. It helps to insulate the house, and it gives a sort of semi-protected growing environment. This one at the moment is mostly seems to be full of psychoactive cacti. Lophophora and Trichocereus, San Pedros of different species. And there's other random things going on in here, and then stuff we're going to be bringing in for the winter and sorting out. A couple of worm bins down here. This is a wood-fired hot tub, which is how we heat this greenhouse on really, really cold nights. It's also how we take a bath in the wintertime. Another greenhouse over on this side. This one is pretty full of leftover seedlings. All needs to be sorted out, all kind of weedy, and seeds planted to germinate next spring in the flats in the back. I potted up some comfrey just because the ducks are so fond of it. Give them something green to eat in the winter, perhaps. So yeah, just a working area. These greenhouses are prone to freeze a little bit, but nothing like outside. Might get down to, say, 25 in here on the really worst nights. Outside is a kind of a nursery area, and we're packing in trees and shrubs to overwinter them down there, and then we'll cover that all over with leaves. There's another greenhouse. On the other side of the house. a cane the other day for a pointer. What did I do with it?
I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know. Might lose my pointers.
Oh, no.